And just hearing you kind of speak about a lot of it seems like, at least from the at least Illumina side of things, the technology, the brilliance of the technology really was the thing that pulled in like early adopters, like abroad, like others, right? Even say like the UK from a whole genome population sequencing perspective, even drew in like the Australian Prime Minister, who was very interested as well, right? Like just many people were interested based on just the technology itself. So now that maybe some of that has, I wouldn't say dwindled, but maybe that has created results that maybe weren't as simple as people would have thought it would be, like the paper that Costas kind of referenced. How do you, as an advisor to other genomic companies or other biotech companies, how do you advise them on like how should if someone wanted to start a company today, or they have a company and want to deliver value to their customers, like how should they think about this particular space and how they should deliver value? Because I don't know if you is it just purely based on, and I don't believe this to be the case, so maybe I'm leading the witness here a little bit, but it can't just be, oh, we'll just create like cheaper, like we'll just do the sequencing constantly cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and that's the answer, because it doesn't seem like what you're saying doesn't seem like that's the problem, at least that you see. So maybe if you could kind of walk someone through, if I was just a new entrepreneur in this space, want to start a company, or someone who's in this space already has a company, how do you advise me to, hey, move forward in this changing landscape?
Oh my gosh, I can talk for 9 hours on that, but I promise I won't.
Perfect.
Another great.
Perfect.
Um, just thinking it through. I want to use two examples that are almost completely opposite. So I think it shows the richness of the opportunity. So one in particular is a company I'm on the board of called GenCove, which is in New York City, and some folks out of the the New York Genome Center that were very interested in this. Right? Remember, I just talked about how much sequencing was done for cancer tumor normals. The funny thing embedded in that, for those not familiar, is a normal, let's call it a normal genome sequence. The sequencer runs through the same area 30 times. And because it's a fairly error prone process. And so it's, if you will, you're going to do it 30 times and then look at that particular location along the genome and just check, did I get a lot of C's? Did I get a lot of G's? What happened there? And then we'll call the base and say, no, that's a G. And so these folks recognize that there's a lot of redundancy in that process. And so there's this thing called low pass sequencing that says, why do we do it 30 times all the time? Let's just do it once. And the amazing thing about most genomes, when you think about it, is every time you get a new genome, it kind of looks a lot like the old genomes, right? If you're getting if you're getting a cat genome and you sequence another cat, your own cat, it's, I don't know what the numbers are. It's something like 99% exactly the same as every other cat. It's probably more than that. So it's only very small changes. And so, long story short, with GenCove, they recognized that there was a huge market in agriculture for sequencing. But agriculture is a very cost-sensitive business, and sequencing to 30x was just too expensive. So they built the whole technology and the offering, which is primarily cloud-based, around the idea of just do a 1x sequence, which is very inexpensive, and we'll take the relatively noisy genome and we'll use informatics to clean it up. And yes, you may not want to prescribe a cancer diagnostic on it, but if I'm doing a plan for cattle breeding, it's perfectly great. And I would draw that distinction. It has applications in human, I would say less diagnostic, but for example, in human, large-scale human programs where you're looking at huge amounts of data and processing that data, because you have such a broad averaging and denoising effect in the data. And that company is doing really well and is being amazingly effective in ag. So it's super fun to go to the board meetings because you're often talking about cattle breeding and all the weird elements of that. It used to be that they would only genotype the bull because, I should get this number, but you have one bull for every, I don't know, 1,000 cows or something like that. So you kind of get half the genome that way. But at a certain price point, they want to do all the cows as well as the bull. And, we're crossing over into that point now. So it's from a business point of view, fabulously inelastic. It's also driven by the cost of genome sequencing, which, as you know, has been radically dropping in the last couple of years as competition comes in for Illumina. And that's helped that business as well. You get to ride those curves. All the work and all the competition that happens accrues to you as a provider of sequencing on that side. The other extreme, in a way, from that is proteomics. I'm fascinated by that, probably as a new convert, again, as an engineer discovering these things at the same time as all the other non-experts. That the central dogma of biology, I guess, is that you've got DNA, and the DNA gets processed into RNA, which gets processed into proteins, and everything entire body is built up of proteins. And for all sorts of interesting reasons, and the sequences of amino acids, and for all sorts of reasons, it's incredibly difficult to sequence them. And we thought DNA sequencing was the miracle, but now DNA sequencing has become every day, so that's a hard business to compete in. As we see, you've got obviously Illumina as a very unusually strong monopoly, and some very well-run companies like Element are proving that you can compete against Illumina, but so many have fallen by the wayside and never made a profit. And it's just a very, very difficult business. But proteomics is now an open field. And the expectation is that potentially is a much bigger market than genomics, right? That now you go, no, I'm not just analyzing the plan for the building, but I'm analyzing the whole building itself, the materials in the building, what are the walls made out of, how much moisture is in the concrete. It's sort of an infinite analogy. And so I'm on the board of am I board? No, I'm an advisor to a couple of companies that have very innovative ways of doing proteome sequencing. And so I'm very excited to see how that comes out. And I think you're seeing more and more activity. We saw Thermo Fisher buy Olink within the last 12 months for $3.4 billion. And so you're starting to see really strong interest in it. That might be an impact of if the antitrust environment does change with this new administration. Wouldn't surprise me if Illumina went and bought a proteomics company, for example.